The other thing we do is that we squeeze supply chain margins. And some of this happened by accident. In fact, most of what we've done really happened by accident. Now I can sit here, stand here, and talk as if this was a grand plan. The reality is that I'm talking about what I've discovered with hindsight. A few years ago, we used to make a product called a Pocket Surfer, and this device, we used to buy certain custom LCD and a custom touchscreen. And the supplier that used to supply us that went bust. They went bankrupt, couldn't supply us these touchscreens and LCDs anymore. And we went to everybody else in the industry and we said, we need these. And they said, what is your quantity? And we said, I need 50,000. They said, we don't get out of bed for 50,000. Our customers are Samsung and LG and these guys. And if you can do $1 million a month, then come back to us. Otherwise, this is not a business for us. And we thought, well, how difficult can it be? Let's figure out, can we make an LCD screen or can we make a touch screen? After a couple of years of development, we developed our own touch screens. Today, it costs us $2.50 to make a 7-inch multi-touch projected capacitive touch screen, whereas the cost from China in a 1 million unit quantity is $11. It's not that we make it cheaper than the Chinese. If it costs us $2.50 to make, the Chinese probably make it for $2, who knows? But there's a supply and demand mismatch. A lot of smartphones being sold, a lot of tablets being sold out there, a lot of demand for it, not enough supply for it, so the margins are high. By being able to make the touchscreens and then subsequently the LCDs, we were able to break that price barrier of those key components. That was a very important aspect of the hardware part of it. This concept of good enough really has been well talked about by a Harvard professor by the name of Clayton Christensen. He wrote a book that I felt had a significant impact on me called The Innovator's Dilemma. And those that haven't read it, again, that's something I recommend, that you've got to read this book. And what he talked about in this book was the performance demand in the low end of the market and the performance demand in the high end of the market. And what he showed was that while the performance in the low end of the market will start below the requirements of the high end, over time, that performance will exceed the requirements of both the low end and the high end. And the customer will accept this concept of good enough. And I'll give you a few examples. When the iPhone first came out, I remember I was on a panel at an event, and there were some people from Apple there, there's a guy from Sony there, there's a guy from Nintendo, and we used to make this product called the Pocket Surfer. They said, let's put the Sadaji on there too, we'll make the panel colorful. And so I got to sit between these people and talk about this thing. And they asked the Nintendo guy and the Sony guy, do you think that the iPhone will kill mobile handheld gaming consoles? And he said, of course not. The user experience in that doesn't compare to the PS2 and the kind of rich graphics that we provide here. No way, they're not in the same league. Today we know what the reality is. That industry's been decimated because most of the gaming on handheld devices happens on smartphones, not on dedicated consoles. I remember companies like Kodak and Fuji and Polaroid and others that used to make cameras that said, look at the quality on a smartphone. It's not, come on. Quality on a phone camera will never be as good as a regular camera. And they were right. But today, 95% of all pictures that are taken in the world are taken on a phone. Remember MP3s and CDs? People used to sell CDs, and you know what happened to the CD market? Ask your driver if he's carrying a USB stick. That's what happened to the CD market. Nobody thought that MP3s could kill CDs because the quality and the fidelity is not the same. So, inexpensive and good enough over time always beats expensive and great. So here's our experience with this. The iPad 1 was a 1 gig processor, Cortex-A8 architecture, 256 megabytes of RAM. The Akash 1 was a 366 megahertz processor on an ARM11 architecture, 256 of RAM. And arguably, some could say that the quality or performance was not near what even the low end of the market would accept. So there's a lot of pushback on that. But Akash 2, which is the equivalent of what you see being handed around, is a Cortex-A8 1 gig processor, same caliber processor as the original iPad, and 512 megabytes of RAM. Same level of processor, double the RAM. It's good enough. When Apple introduced that first product, it cost them $35 for that processor. Today it costs us $3.50 for the exact same processor. Is it good enough for my customer base? It is good enough. The original iPad experience is good enough. The next iPad went to a dual-core processor and 512 RAM. Then a dual-core processor and a gig of RAM. And the iPad 4 went to a 1.3 gig dual-core processor and a gig of RAM. And the Akash 4 will be out in about a month, which is a 1.5 gig dual-core processor and a gig of RAM. For the government's buy price will be around 2,000 rupees. It's good enough, not only for the low end of the market, from a performance perspective, it'll be good enough even for the higher end of the market. Even the current iPad, the current version of the product which is being handed out, is a competitive user experience. The next issue that we had to solve, which is a big portion of what our business model is all about, was the issue of delivering the internet. So, okay, great, you figured out somehow you can create low-cost devices. At the end of the day, it's not about the device, it is about internet access. The killer app is internet access. And with less than 50 million landline phones and the mobile networks congested, that was a key issue we had to solve. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but we developed a core technology on which we received 18 US patents now, a number of international patents. And in essence, what we end up doing is we reduce bandwidth consumption by factors of 10 to 30 times, reduce the amount of processing power and memory that client devices need. And the result is that even on today's GPRS networks, you can get a good enough user experience. A CNN page, which normally is a megabyte and a half, we can deliver by consuming less than 30 kilobytes on the network. Two benefits of that. First, it goes through faster. Second is lower data consumption means the costs go down. And we decided as a result of that we needed to think of a new kind of business model. And the business model wasn't, here I sold my device and I made my margin and I go away. Traditionally, if you make a device for $50, the market price becomes $150. You add another $30 for yourself. For $80, you sell it to the wholesaler. He adds another $20 or $30 for himself. For $110, he sells it to the retailer. The retailer adds his margin, you're at $150. And somewhere in the middle of that, there's duties and taxes and so on. And we have to figure out how to address that portion of it. Can you make a device for $50 and sell it for $55? Is that possible? And the way it is possible is if you separate the user and the payer. And we discovered this not by our own innovation, but by realizing what Baidu in China was doing and what Amazon was doing in the US. Amazon has a tablet in the US called the Kindle Fire that they sell for $199 that cost them $240 to make. So how did these guys lose $40 on that product? Well, they realized that their customer that buys that product downloads a certain amount of ebooks, certain amount of other content, and that becomes an enabler to the next level. So we said, hey, the user generates income. So instead of just the guy buying the device, can I make money on what happens afterwards? Currently, this is what our business model creates. Hardware and hardware-related warranties are less than 25% of our profit. Network services is a big portion, content and apps is a big portion, and advertising is the rest of it. 75% of our profits come after the customer bought the device. And that is a change in business model from what was traditionally being done on hardware. Because of the internet delivery platform we created, we believe that we can launch free internet access in India. And we're trying very hard to be able to launch it before the end of this year. So you could buy a device from us for 3,999, 4,000 rupees. Has a cellular modem built in. You could put a SIM in it, and the internet access on that device will be free. That's it. How do we make it free? Well, our compression technology reduces data consumption. We do wholesale deals with the operator to get a bulk lower rate. The operator doesn't bill you, the operator bills me. And then I use advertising to make it free. You watch TV, you don't pay for the show you just watched. Who pays for that show? The advertiser does. Great. The real money isn't made by the guy that just made the TV. The real money is made by the guy that makes the content for that TV. And who pays him for that content? Not the guy who bought the TV, the advertiser. This is a sustained business model. Why not do it for this? Very low cost devices. Don't worry about margin on devices. Cover your cost on devices, and then focus on the recurring revenue streams that happen afterwards. So content and apps becomes a big portion for us. We partner with a number of entities. This year, we launched a contest in partnership with the United Nations, a global call for socially responsible apps to empower women. Because we thought, hey, if the next 3 billion are going to come on board, what are the right apps for them? Can we create apps that are focused on the social good? And this was one of the contests we launched. And we do a lot of hackathons. So we partner with universities, we sponsor devices and pizza and pop, and we teach kids coding, and then we get them to think of creating apps that would be impactful. And this is not as charity. This is planting the seeds for where I know where the money is. Do you know there was a company called Compaq and Gateway and eMachines? Those hardware PC companies don't exist today. Who exists are the content guys and the software guys, Google and Microsoft and so on. So I thought, hey, if that's the case, what's the killer app for that next level customer? The big guys have never figured it out. Who'll figure it out? These students will. Let me pay for pizza and pop for a weekend, come talk to them, give them out a few devices, get a bunch of them thinking in that direction, because I get first access to devices. So nothing I'm doing is for charity. Everything's for profit, except the realization I have is for a different level customer than my competitors. If I could spend a couple of moments on that. I get asked very often, so when Apple realizes this market exists, they're going to crush you. And I say, you're right, 100%. The moment Apple realizes that this market exists, they can own that market and they'll crush us. The reality is they will not realize it. This is the reality. I can do as many talks as possible and do TED Talks and talk at universities and I can write a book on this thing. They will not realize it. How I can prove it? They're sitting on $150 billion in cash that they don't know what to do with. They're criticized regularly that they got $150 billion in cash that generates them no income at all. And a third of that cash, not all of it, not half of it, 30% of that cash is enough to give one of these to every student in the world. In the whole world. That's it. 1 billion students, 40 bucks a unit, but $40 billion, that's it. You think anybody else realized it? 2 weeks ago, Microsoft spent $42 billion they didn't know what to do with to buy back their own shares. There's a lot of money out there, but if Apple puts out a $50 product, and you realize it's good enough, you won't buy the $500 version. And because there's always a lineup to buy the $500 version, they will not put out their $50 product. So this is an opportunity for us to create a business where the big guys will not compete. Think of it in another perspective. The Akash 4 tender is out. 14.7 million units potentially in that tender. 14.7 million units. Let me explain how big that is. The total number of laptops, PCs, and servers being sold in India annually is only about 12 million. So that one single buyer order is more than the total PC market in India, right? So it's a big tender. Samsung is not going to bid. Neither is Apple or LG or HP or anybody else. Because if they bid, then that impacts everything else that they do. So what's our strategy?
How much is the production capacity?
That's a different kind of problem, I'll tell you later. So the question was, what is our production capacity? And I'll explain what that is, but I'll answer that question. It's not 14.7 million units. So what's the strategy? And it's not just in India. We found this useful in India, and now we're doing this in 13 other countries. We evangelize the use of technology for education to the government. We work with the government and NGOs to validate and create awareness. Use that publicity to create consumer demand. And the consumer demand for the devices is really a beachhead for internet access. At the end of the day, this whole journey is about delivering the internet. That's it. We're doing this in a number of countries. The problems are way bigger than India. We're doing it in Mexico, Nicaragua, Uruguay, a number of African countries, and elsewhere. But the problems in some of these places, especially our neighbors, is much, much greater. If you've heard the name Malala Yousafzai, there's a little girl that got pulled off a bus because she was going to school and got shot in the head. There are parts of the world where girls get taken off buses and get acid thrown at them because there are people that don't want them to get an education. That's the reality of the world we live in. And computing internet access can empower them in a way that until the security issues are solved, they can have technology in the palm of their hand in the security of their home and still be able to access education. This is why we think that this is important. As we worked with these hackathons, we had a group of students at IIT Kanpur that created a Fruitwala app. That is, we tried to take Fruitwalas and said, can we create a point of sale terminal for them and get them to use it for somebody that doesn't have high levels of literacy but has some reasonable numeracy skills? And we're finding that to be successful. So we're finding very interesting kinds of things. There are orphanages in Uganda where the girls are coding and creating apps. What's happened in the Indian market, though, is an interesting kind of experience. No business plan. We made lots of great business plans, and every 6 months we throw it out and we rewrite it, and another 6 months go by, we have to rewrite the whole thing. We entered the Indian market in late 2011. Total number of tablets being sold in India at that time was 250,000 units a year. And every 1,000 units, that would be a big deal. That would be a fantastic kind of thing that, that would be a respectable kind of number for the Indian market. When the publicity started, we were truly caught unprepared. Because we were trying to make 2,000 units a month. We started getting 100,000 unit worth of orders online every day from 100,000 different consumers. By the time we launched, there's about 4 million of these. And we had to figure out how to scale. The market's expanded significantly. It's gone from 250,000 units in 2011 to 2012, 3.1 million units. It'll be about 5 or 6 million units this year. At the start of the year, we became the largest supplier of tablets in India, selling more than Apple or Samsung. Currently, we put out 2,500 to 3,000 units every day, when our target originally was that if we could do 2,000 a month, we were going to be happy. This is not a tablet customer that's buying this. This is a brand new customer that is buying their first PC. This is not a traditional tablet customer. And this is what we were trying to prove, that it's not a tablet customer that we're going after. We're trying to convince people they need their first computer. And it's contagious. The Indian government's decided that they're going to put tablets in the hands of all 220 students. And it doesn't matter which government comes in. I don't know that there's any other way to solve the problem of education in this country. Computing internet access is going to be necessary. There's 40, even though we're only working with 13 of them, there are 42 countries in the world that have decided that broad deployment of computing internet access is essential to improve education. We're having fun in this journey. Thank you so much.